Thank you all for coming this afternoon. My name's Graeme Finley with Thornton. We're facilitating this session this afternoon, which is a panel session on the approvals and procurement track. And the premise behind it basically is the way that a procurement is conducted has a really important effect on the success of a project. I think somebody told me once that you can't guarantee the success of a project by the way you do a procurement, but you might be able to guarantee the failure of a project depending on how you do the procurement. And it really is an important element of the term we use, building a solid foundation for the project. So what we wanted to do today was sort of talk about some of the key elements, those aspects of the procurement process that really have a material impact on the success of the procurement, and then will have an ongoing impact on the life of the project. And to do that, we brought together a distinguished panel who have enormous amount of experience in this area to share their thoughts with you. The way we're going to structure the panel is we have a series of topics, and for each of the topics, I'll basically do a very brief introduction about the topic, and then I'll ask each of the panelists in turn to give me some of their thoughts with, the particular focus we have is on any general thought you have about the importance of the topic, why it's important, any specific experiences that you might want to share about specific projects or procurements where this was demonstrated as either an issue, and then any lessons learned you have. In particular, things you definitely want to do again or things you would never want to do again. And then we'll open it up for questions. And we're going to have a question and answer period at the end of every topic. And I think this will be interesting and informative just listening to the panelists, but the real value will be if you start asking questions and we can get into a conversation about issues that are important to you. We obviously have a lot of experience in the room, and I think there's a good opportunity for everybody to learn something during the process. So what I'd like to do is start by just having the panelists introduce themselves very briefly, and then we'll dive right into the first topic. So, Kim, do you want to start?
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Heartley-Humphrey, and I work for the Health and Human Services Agency, Office of Systems Integration, and I am the Chief of OSI Acquisitions. And I have been involved in IT contracting for about 25 years of my 37 years of state service experience.
You don't have to get that specific.
we don't want to tell our ages.
I know. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. First of all, I just need to kind of see a hand of who was all in this morning's meeting, if I could. Okay, good. So you heard a lot about some of the things we're already doing. So my name is Marnell Voss, and I'm the Acting Deputy Director for Statewide Technology Projects for the Department of Technology. And I came over, I'm 6 weeks old, but I have a lot of years in purchasing. I started off in the supplier, so answering bids in the supplier market, and then came over to the Department of General Services about 21 years ago as a staff EDP acquisition specialist, and worked my way through and around and through all of those wonderful procurement reform days and the 23 initiatives and the panel of, this and that, reforming how we do purchasing, where we couldn't even buy stamps or mail for our Pitney Bowes machines because we had put out this bulletin that would not allow any sole source stuff. So it took us a while to work all that out. So I have a lot of experience from that perspective when procurement gets in trouble. And then I just came back from being doing medical contracts for the receiver's office, which was a lot of fun to figure out the difference between a provider network and an IT network. So I spent about 5 years there doing 4 huge procurements. So.
I'm Sheri Huber from the Employment Development Department, and I started out processing taxes, and I became a subject matter expert on a tax project, an IT project to go from manual to imaging. So we were scanning, intelligent character recognition, all of that. And so I was the subject matter expert working on a procurement and the whole FSR RFP, writing requirements, wonderful experience. I was really young at the time, and I really liked it. And ever since, I've been doing contracts ever since. So that's been a little, not quite 25, but over 20.
Oh, hi, good afternoon. My name is Michael Banuelos. I am the procurement manager of the Franchise Tax Board. I work for the procurement and contracting officer at the Franchise Tax Board. Like every other little boy, I had a dream to grow up and be a procurement analyst and a contract analyst. Some kids were playing with fire trucks, and I was probably playing with contracts.
You were buying them.
I was buying them, yes. I've been with the Franchise Tax Board since 1996. I did take a 2-year hiatus to go work at the Department of General Services. So that really changed my perspective on the procurement landscape in California. So at the Franchise Tax Board, I started off in commodities, computers, printers, those types of things, and you move on to services, and you eventually scale up to these large, big systems integration projects, and that's where a lot of the focus is on these days. And I'm very happy to be on this panel today. My Chief Information Officer, Kathy Cleek, actually called me and said, hey, I gave your name to Graeme. I want you to consider being on this panel. So I thought about it. Obviously anybody would be a little bit nervous going, do I have anything to offer? So it was kind of 50-50, and then Graeme called me, and I heard that lovely British accent. And once you hear that accent, so in the nicest way possible, you had me at hello. Hopefully you take that as a joke that it is, but I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Okay. Can you get the blush on camera back there?
Well, at least we have a lively group this afternoon, right?
Yeah,
After
I'm
lunch.
getting a little bit worried. Okay, so the first topic we wanted to discuss was about using the procurement process itself to improve the quality of the outcomes in the procurement. So the kind of things that we're looking to discuss here are the steps that you can take and the tools that are available in the procurement toolbox to improve the quality of the procurement. So things like, we heard some of them this morning in the discussion, like draft RFPs, draft proposals, market research process, use of 6611, negotiations, the BAFO process. So what I would ask the panel members basically is to give our thoughts on, the sort of the state of the art there. There are a lot of tools in the toolbox that are available, and the question would be, are we making best use of those? Are there lessons we can learn? And, what do you see as, opportunities for improvement? So since microphone's right in front of Marnell, I'm going to ask her to go first.
Okay.
And then cycle through.
Great. Well, since I've been on board for the last 6 weeks, I've learned a lot about where IT is in the arena of, how other people or other states are buying and how our customers, because I think of all of our departments as a customer of mine, because I don't have a job if you don't need us, right? So we're professionals and experts in the purchasing field. And when we talk about, for me now, it's large reportable IT projects, a lot of things haven't changed, but I think where we're using the tools is changing. How we're using the tools is changing, and we're getting much better at, at really criteria and spelling out value to not just the supplier community, but also to our stakeholders. The teams are getting deeper within the department. You can't have a successful, I always say that I can buy you the best product in the world and write the best contract in the world, and you will not have a successful project if you don't have a great team with depth, and you don't have project readiness sitting in your department, and if you don't have commitment. So it appears to me that we still have some of the same issues with readiness in the department for these large procurements, but we do have still a lot of tools. With the STAR project that you heard about this morning, we're getting involved a lot earlier. So we're deciding a lot earlier what the business requirements need to look like, what the team looks like, what the kickoff is going to look like, what we have as an implementation strategy, those kinds of things. We have we have a whole STAR reform effort going on that includes policies and procedures and the gate process and where we start and stop. We have a lot of information now for best and final offers and negotiations. I know that's been scary for a lot of you, but we feel like we've gotten a lot better at it, and we have a whole planning document for going into negotiations. We're also doing a lot in the respect of supplier outreach. Now, I'm not going to say that we're in the procurement process itself. We are real friendly with the supplier community because there is a line that's kind of drawn when the RFP process actually happens. But before that, in the market research area, and during the process, as long as you have a procurement official, we're very open with the confidential discussions. Before we even issue an RFP now, we're sending out a draft to get comments back before we do a final RFP on the street. We're doing confidential discussions more than once if we need to. They're not, we have some rules, but we really do not have total closed policy around procurements. It's amazing, actually, how much flexibility we have. So we're constantly looking for new tools, don't you think, and trying new...
Procurement's an art.
Yeah, it is. And then crafting language, right? We're doing, I know for us, we're working with the supplier community and creating some templates so that you'll be able to pick and choose in your statement of work certain kinds of things that you'll be able to put in your bids so that we ensure the integrity of the statement of work. Because, we got our standard terms and conditions, but it's a lot more than that. It is about the statement of work and how that can be changed within the scope of the project to keep the contract fresh.
Something I would like to add, and that is, as a customer of Caltex and DGS, is involving our control agencies sooner in the process, because I think what happens is sometimes the departments go off, they think they know what they're doing, and they're probably pretty good and have a good shop, but they get off on a tangent and they get far into the process, I'm talking months, and they think they're ready to put out their RFP, and then they have to go to DGS or Caltech to get it approved or whatever, and then they find, oh, we've done some things wrong, or some of the terms and conditions or boilerplate language has changed. And so I think it's much more helpful to involve them at the beginning of your project so that they can offer guidance, guide you, provide the latest, newest, what's available, because it's always changing, and things just go much smoother when you do that.
I'd like to add that in our current procurement and contracting process, in the use of 6611 and draft RFPs and draft proposals, we could already do that. We don't need any new legislation. We don't need any more rules, please, that tell us we have to do this, this, and this. We already have the ability and flexibility to do draft solicitations and do RFIs and do market surveys. And it's been my experience that the program people need to be more involved and committed in defining what are their business needs to help the IT people to assist them in writing clearly defined requirements. And one way you can do those clearly defined requirements is by doing an RFI. And I agree with Sheri, that we need to get either DGS or STPD involved immediately so that we can put out those documents in a structured way, that we can have discussions with the vendor community, discussions with your programs, with your projects, so that we're all on the same page with the document that we put out to the vendor community. And STPD and DGS, over the years, before it was STPD, I was the deputy at Department of Information Technology, and I was responsible for all IT statewide. And the partnering with your control agency, i.e. at that time it was DGS and it was Department of Finance, that all three departments need to be on the same page with what it is that we're buying and clearly define what those costs are.
I can't be the only one that doesn't say anything. So I would really strongly agree with everything that these three ladies said. I totally agree. We always need to look at all the processes that we're working on. And one of the, I'm always asking my colleague Yvonne when we have an issue here of in certain contracts or procurements, one of the things I look at is there are process problems, and then sometimes there are people problems. And I think one of the things processes are very tangible. We can create a new process, we can create a new form. We want to make things efficient and timely and not have to do so much paperwork and all that. And I absolutely agree that we should always be looking at those processes to look for new ways to procure things and contract for things so it doesn't take 2 years to do these. But I also think a huge element of success, and not just for procurement, but for other things that each department does. Each of your unique departments have a very special workload that you do. I look at the maturity of the organization, the leadership of the organization, their ability to prioritize the things that they're working on, to get resources, to communicate amongst themselves in the department, to figure out what their priorities are. And I don't want to give FTB too big of a plug, but I feel very lucky that we do that very well there. So I think when we say there's already tools in place, all of these things that they're talking about, confidential discussions, draft proposals, conceptual proposals, I've sat through mock evaluations. Nobody ever thought of doing a mock evaluation. You guys maybe have sat through one, but has anybody else ever sat through a mock evaluation? So one, which is very good. The problem I think that we have with doing some of these things and using the tools that we have is always schedule. And I don't want to minimize the schedule, because that schedule is there because somebody needs to provide a service to the public or get something up and running. But sometimes we're a little bit over-focused on the schedule, and then we don't take advantage of some of these tools that are out there for us. So I'm also equally interested in the people side and not just the process side.
Okay, I guess I could sort of a follow-up question around that. And, from an outsider perspective, the vendor, and looking at the procurements that come out from the state, these elements of the toolbox, like confidential discussions, conceptual bids, draft RFPs, 6611, they've been sort of on the books for a long time. People have been able to use them, but I haven't seen them used very widely. And so the question I have is it primarily a schedule thing, or is it people maybe don't realize that they're really available, or there's a concern about risk, in doing something?
Of all of those. I agree. I think it is a combination of all of, maybe people don't know about them, but in order to do a 6611, you have to do a justification, or we used to have to do a justification to DGS that showed that the department or the agency has the skill set to be able to conduct this kind of procurement. And so, you have to go through a whole justification just to get permission to do that. So departments don't maybe have the expertise to be able to conduct a large procurement. So at OSI, I have done 3 6611s. They have been very different in terms of when you invoke the 6611. So you could do it after the award, but again, it's part of your planning, and you lay out how you're going to conduct the procurement and what those steps are. So there's a lot of planning that goes into doing it.
So just as a plug, we all have expertise in different areas, and I our departments and the procurement officials in our departments are amazing. But there's also some turnover because in many instances, they do not have the ability, our customers do not have the ability, unless have a large IT shop, to either use the EDP series or to use ISAs or senior ISA series for their buying. So, naturally, departments are always looking for people with procurement experience. I mean, if I had to do my career over again, I would never give up my procurement and contracting experience. I might have added a bunch more years in budgets and maybe a year in HR if I could have actually taken a year. But that would have really, I think, rounded out what I can offer in a process type arena for my customer. So I think in a lot of instances, you don't see everything being used because we have in the customer departments, a lot of times the people that are doing the RFOs or the CMAS requests for offers or doing the WISCAs or doing the smaller procurements that are non-reportable projects do not have the years in because as soon as you get that training in them, they're gone because you don't have the career path to hold them to a procurement area, right? And so we're fortunate, I think, in the Department of Technology and also at DGS, and some of you, like Correction, I know has a larger procurement shop as a department. We're fortunate that we have some professional requirements to allow our duty statements and the classifications we have to be at a higher level because we do things statewide and we do have to offer the services to all of our customers, so we have to have expertise for that. So I think that's why in many instances you don't see some of these things because it's hard to learn everything and use all of the tools for any size project, for any level of person within a department. So a lot of times you see the control agencies or the larger shops really use it. And I think 6611 for some people is really scary. You're going to walk in a room with a supplier that you think knows more than you do, and now sit down and negotiate over requirements and pricing. I mean, what happens if they actually want to charge me more at the end? And I've actually experienced that, where that's not what we thought you wanted. So now it's going to be another $500,000 for that, and another $200,000 for that, and pretty soon I'm up to $1 million, and I'm supposed to be negotiating lower prices, not higher. So I think that you need tools and you need expertise, and I think that is why we have control agencies and larger departments to help bring that knowledge base and skill set to the table. And I have a number of people that are really gifted in negotiations and have some tools and are available, right? I mean, they are available.
So let me follow on to that. Now, I'm going to date myself, and this was before 6611.
Was this the APP process?
The alternate, well, no, it was,
process?
yes, the alternate procurement. Yeah, and it was still a pilot, so it wasn't even in SAM as a regular, well, they've changed the name since. Anyway, so it was a long time ago when the standard 213 was the standard 2, and there was a health and welfare data center. Well, we were getting into that big project where the contractor was going to use a tax-exempt bonding method to finance his integration project with us, and we're like, oh my God, we don't know how to do that. We got Pat Mullins on, there's a bond, financing guy, and plus we were going to have to negotiate general terms and conditions. That was before we had our 10 pages of IT GTCs. It was like pages and pages, and they wanted additional stuff. So EDD at the time, we didn't have the experience, like you said, and it's like, there's no way. And I was like an accountant one that's kind of equivalent to It's below an SSA classification, so there was no way. I knew taxes, but I did not know contract negotiations. So what we did is we got a lawyer from the Health and Welfare Data Center who was kind of expert in that type of things, and Halferber, and he sat at the table for us and sat with the big wigs from Unisys Corporation and their lawyers and their finance folks, and they helped us negotiate that contract, and that contract ended up being very successful. Could we have done all of that on our own? No way. And most departments, like you said, can't. They just don't have the experience or do enough of those types of procurements to have that type of experience. So I would borrow from the departments. I'm pointing at you and DGS. They're not here. Maybe they're out there. To go to them for that expertise, and I'm sure they would gladly, sit in and help you out.
Certainly, especially now that we have a toolkit, so it's pretty well defined. We contract people feel a little more secure when we have defined things to use, right? Because we're kind of in that language, and what the written word says means something. So we like to have things defined, so it's more comfortable.
So where we're at, I actually believe that what we do is a discipline, and it has been proven that it's a discipline. We went through this work effort where we came up with the IT acquisition series classification that could be used at departments so that we can build the skills out in the department. Before Arnold left office, my understanding is that it was at DPA was the last place, and Franchise Tax Board, Joan Rebane, I don't think she started it at Franchise Tax, and then she retired. No, then she went to DGS, and then she retired. So we got it as far as we could go. I understand it's back out again.
They're looking at it again.
And so they're looking at it again. So there's some hope that we will have a classification that actually details a discipline, and we can train you to start using all of these tools that are already in place today, that we don't have to do any more legislation. So,
Can I'd like to open it up to the group just in terms, do you have any sort of thoughts you'd like to share around this, or questions for the panelists in this area around either 6611, drafts, confidential discussions, any other steps in the process? Joe?
What creativity have you seen around where you just don't award on cost?
There's lots of,
So can you guys speak of that? What difference-
the best value, yeah.
How do you go about crafting that?
Right, and we've gotten much better. I had a couple people in a meeting the other day that said to me, I just don't understand how you're going to work. I've got this new initiative that I get to do, because I'm the newest, right? So you always get what no one else wants as a project. So I'm working with our supplier community to create a supplier performance scorecard or balance sheet that we will use in the future. How far we're going to be able to go with that, I'm not sure. As far as years worth of data or how that looks, I met with the suppliers, about 20 of them yesterday afternoon for about 3 hours. We got a really good start on criteria and all those kinds of things. But what I said to the group when they said that to me about, there's no way you're going to do this, I said, that's what everybody said when we started working with best value. And we weren't very good at it in the beginning. We weren't very good at, okay, this requirement is weighted, or is most important, or these set of requirements are most important to us, and they've got a 5% weighting score. This group of requirements are, not as important, but they've got a 3% weighted score, and then now you're going to change those, and then you've got your cost, which is always part of everything, because we are certainly mindful of the costs of solutions, because it's not our money. I mean, it is our money. We pay taxes, but it's our customers' budget and taxpayer money. So then we always say, because remember in the old days, I mean, you could not get DGS when I first came on board ever, at least from the cost being at a minimum of 50%, and they liked it better when it was 60 or 70%, and your value could only be 30%, right? So creativity, solutions, communications, implementation, past performance, all of that was 30% of the value. I mean, that doesn't really make a difference when you start looking at cost. So we've gotten much better at it. We have tons of examples, all kinds of ways to do it, and we do it based on points, in exchanging points, and then putting, cost into points and adding them together. Then we can even go as far as, and I've done this on several occasions, is rating the value, the suppliers, and saying in the criteria that we're going to go to the top 10% or 20% or 30% of the suppliers. We're going to start with whoever gives us the most value. We're going to give them 20 to 30 days to negotiate with us, and if they won't, we're going to go to the next one. I mean, so as long as you set up your criteria in the bid, which is hard to do, but we're much better at it, and we have lots of examples to share. The criteria in the bid, when it goes out, you can get very creative about where your value is and how you're going to award your contract and be on very safe ground.
EDD used that for our debit cards to pay claimants their unemployment and disability insurance benefits, because those are $0 contracts. Right. There is no dollar amount to quantify. So what we do is have a point system and a weighting system on what requirements are more important. And so it was very important that the claimants didn't have to pay a bunch of fees. And so based on the fee structure that the particular banks and debit card providers had, would either give them more points for not having very many fees or less. Also, if they wanted to share some of the revenue with the state, that got them more points. They didn't have to, but if they shared a portion of their revenue with the state, they got points for that, and then points based on their experience and other stuff. And we set thresholds. Only bidders that meet a certain threshold, like 70, usually I set it like 80%, so we get the better group of employers. So once they pass that threshold, then they can go on to the next steps of evaluation. So it's doable.
Very. Yeah. And I just want to share that, when I left DGS to go over to the receiver's office, when we were under federal court order and everybody thought we could do whatever we wanted, right? And we really couldn't. There are rules. Wherever you go, there's rules. And Mr. Kelso really wanted to move back towards the state process, because everybody was saying we were, was angry about how much money they thought was being spent on prison health care. So it was really important to go back, and I felt great that I got to help shepherd us back to state processes where there actually was, cost really was something that mattered. And we ended up on our provider network, and it's not the IT network, it's, the healthcare network, where we went out to bid. We had 6 bidders at the end. HealthNet won the bid, and we contracted with them for a network of hospitals and doctors and specialty clinics and labs and stuff, and we were able to show in black and white a savings of over $2 million a month, which has ended up being almost $600 million over the years that we've done it, and they're still saving. So, I mean, when you can get some savings in there, and you can get some shared, a lot of times we do shared fees, or like you said, recoup if they're willing to provide. I know Franchise Tax Board does that very well. They do a lot of benefit-based.
We actually have a topic a little bit later.
Oh, okay, so never mind on that.
We'll let you talk about it.
Yeah.
Can I grab that real quick here? Because Joe, right? Okay, so very, very good question. Evaluation is always something that we struggle with, but my experience has been that the clearer that our business objectives are, the easier it is for us to develop that evaluation and then weight it. And, it's a constant churning of the evaluation criteria, including doing mock evaluations. That was one of the things we did, was we said, we had somebody write a fake proposal and then use that evaluation criteria to say, okay, we said this was our number 1 through 5 objectives. Does that match with what our evaluation criteria is showing? But it took a lot of work to go through that process. And I think we're also kind of touching on here a little bit about how we're trained in the workforce, right? Because when I started getting trained in '96, the first thing that you get trained on is don't be associated with a protest, right? So we're always fearful of being associated with a protest. Well, one of the things we lean towards is cost is really a tangible, it's very easy, or should be easy, to compare two costs. If we're all bidding on the same thing and mine's 100 and hers is 90, that's easily supportable. But now we're getting into evaluating things where there is ultimately some subjectivity there, where if we have a rating guide and Kim's a 4 on something and I'm a 1, that to me, there's a hole there somewhere which is disconcerting to some. So that's why it could be that we lean a little bit more towards that, but we have to be open to using that best value criteria in order to get us where we really need to be for success.
Especially with a particular group of suppliers, right?
Yes.
Because some suppliers, they're not going to even play if you're not willing to do criteria and best value. If it's just going to be on cost, they won't even come to the table.
And for IT, we are required by statute to do best value. So we can't just do low bid anyway for IT. But I think that deciding 70% of your evaluation should be the subjective part and 30% cost, just as a rule to do it that way. Whereas at DGS, it was 50-50, and if you wanted to do a 70-30 or a 60-40, you had to write a letter to DGS and get permission. I don't believe that that's the case for STPD now, and that the sooner we get STPD involved with helping us to come up with that 70 or 60-40 or 70-30 or what that evaluation criteria is, the better off we'll be.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question or a thought on this topic?
That'll teach them to ask questions, huh?
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. You scared them off now. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic.